Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. Today we are going to dive together into the complex interpretation of ancient texts dealing with Egypt to tell the truth beyond the interpretation or interpretations that can be made of it. We are going to see how Egyptology sorts out the information that serves a starting postulate to the detriment of highly interesting information, but which would slightly upset the modern approach to the question. So how are we going to proceed? Well, we're going to do it in a very pragmatic way. We are simply going to isolate the ancient texts that talk about ancient Egypt. I take this opportunity to give a little nod to Frank from the Curious Moment channel, who allowed me to retrieve some of his texts, which will complement other excerpts that I had already mentioned on the channel, according to some previous videos. By diving into these texts, you will see that many elements that are not considered by modern Egyptology are indeed real. I am particularly thinking of what no other than Herodotus says about the Giza Plateau, where we find what he calls underground passages and wells in the Great Pyramid. In short, a program full of delights that starts now. We will start with Diodorus Siculus, who in his work Historical Library Volume 1 tells us this about the Pyramid of Khufu. It is entirely built of hard stone, difficult to carve, but its duration is eternal. Indeed, for at least 1,000 years, some admit 3,000 or 4,000, these stones have retained their original arrangement and all their appearance to this day. End of quote. It will be interesting to note the mention of hard stones. While the pyramid in the time of Diodorus of Sicily in the 1st century before Christ still had its limestone cladding, which is a soft stone, it is astonishing to think that such well-informed people, whose texts are reliable references in many respects, allow themselves to make such approximations. Unless there is something that is being concealed about the hard stones of the parment, which would have been supplemented with granite, as on the pyramids of Mykerinos and Khephren. It's a possibility, but it's a bit far-fetched, I admit, and we're going to stick to what we just talked about. As for the age of the pyramid, Diodorus gives us a rather wide window, going back to 4,000 years before Christ. Let's now look at what Strabo says in Book 17 of Geography. Here is the long quote. While visiting the pyramids, we observed an extraordinary fact that seemed to us worthy of not being passed over in silence. Large piles of stone shards cover the ground before the pyramids, where one only needs to dig to find small petrifications. Having the shape and size of a lens and sometimes resting on a bed of also petrified debris, quite similar to half-peeled vegetable peelings. It is claimed that these petrifications are the remains of the meals of the workers who built the pyramids, but the thing is hardly plausible. Indeed, in one of the plains of our country, there is an elongated hill filled like this one with fragments of siliceous tuff, which also have this lenticular configuration. The formation of pebbles in the sea and rivers, which raise roughly the same difficulties, can be strictly explained by the nature of the movement that any water current imparts. But here, the question is more troublesome. Indeed, in this passage, Strabo points out elements that were wrongly interpreted 2,000 years ago as remains of workers' meals, whereas it would more likely be fragments left here after the waters had occupied the Giza Plateau. As he also says, this question is likely set aside because, in his words, it is more embarrassing. But it will always be less embarrassing than the way we have, over the centuries, sorted without half measure what we are told. Herodotus, considered the father of history, from whom comes the idea that 100,000 men built the Great Pyramid in history. Too, Herodotus actually mentions that 100,000 men were employed in this work. If we generally accept a period of 20 or 25 years for the construction of the pyramid, we must understand why this duration is given. It's simply because it's supposed to be a tomb for the pharaoh Khufu. The construction period could not exceed the duration of his reign, usually set around a period of 20 or 25 years. A few archaeologists have suggested a 35 to 40 year reign, but the vast majority disagree. 25 years, I was saying then, a rather inconsistent duration when we look at what Herodotus says in the same paragraph where he talks about 100,000 men, judged earlier. Herodotus continues by saying that it took 10 years to build the causeway by which the stones were to be dragged, 10 years for a causeway and only 20 for a pyramid. Logistically, one of the two solutions is problematic. It also becomes complex when Herodotus discusses the underground. If we go by the opinion of the leading figures in modern Egyptology, the possible presence of galleries or tunnels under the Giza Plateau, and not only that, would be nothing more than pure fantasy. This already presents an issue, as closed tunnels are visible when walking around the Giza Plateau. So why deny their existence? Moreover, just a few years ago, these same tunnels were accessible for a bribe. Nevertheless, in the supposed years of work for the road mentioned by Herodotus, he completes his point by adding that the decade was used for. Also, I quote the works of the hill on which the pyramids are raised and to the underground buildings. Did he have Cheops make it to serve as his tomb? Herodotus does not question the sepulchral origin of the pyramid. And in any case, that's not the point of the video, but he does talk about underground buildings. I can already hear some skeptics saying that the underground is simply the underground chamber, which supposedly was one of the first attempts at a sepulchral chamber for the pharaoh. Except that Herodotus clearly states in the following sentence that the pyramid itself took 20 years of work. So there is indeed a distinction made between the pyramid and the rest of the constructions on the Giza Plateau, including the underground tunnels, which would be exclusive to the pyramid of Khufu. As described by Herodotus, still in the same work, I quote, Khafre also had a pyramid built. It does not approach the size of that of Khufu. I have measured both of them. It has neither underground building nor canal to lead the waters from an island to the place where the other one is said to be. The tomb of Khufu is located on an island, and it is surrounded by the waters of an island that reach there through a canal built for this purpose. End of quote. Interesting, don't you think? Firstly, Herodotus is not certain about the initial function of the tomb. The Greek philosopher skillfully weighed his words. He clearly states the location said to be Khufu's tomb. There is a first uncertainty about the presence of the tomb. When he writes, where it is said that finally I correct the statement, not that he writes, but that he had written. Because Herodotus was a traveler who dictated his adventures for publication. So, not only that, but the words are chosen precisely and suggest that pyramid and tomb are two different things. If the pyramid itself was a tomb, why specify that it is thought to be the location of Khufu's tomb? Either it's a tomb or it's a building in which one would find a tomb. In this second case, that would mean the building is not a tomb. Do you understand? If you're not following me, no worries. Just rewind about 15-20 seconds for clarity. We were talking a few moments ago about the incredible task that the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza represents, which would be an impossible task. At least that's how Philon of Byzantium describes it in The Seven Wonders of the World, a work dating from the 3rd century before Christ, in which he tells us this. The construction of the pyramids of Memphis is an impossible task. Their description exceeds all expectations. These are mountains piled upon mountains, and the size of the quadrangular blocks is such that it is hard to conceive their transport. And no one knows by what lever such significant masses could have been moved. End of quote. Herodotus claimed the construction took 20 years, an impossible task. Duration corroborated by Pliny the Elder in natural history. According to Pliny the Elder's prose work, it took 20 years to complete the largest pyramid. However, Pliny, the 1st century author of this incredible encyclopedia that is natural history, gives very different information about the number of men that the construction of the Pyramid of Khufu would have required. Indeed, we are far from the 100,000 men of Herodotus, when Pliny speaks of 360,000 men mobilized for the construction of the pyramid. Even more astonishing, he continues by saying that in the largest pyramid, there is a well of 86 cubits, or 40 meters. And to think that it would have received the river's water in its time, namely the Nile. So at this level, I'll let you do some small research on Google to see what the dimensions of the ascending passage are. And when we talk about the use of water in the Great Pyramid and we put all this end to end, we understand that there is a real coherence that is however obscured today in the modern vision we have of the function of the Great Pyramid of Khufu. So we see that the story that is told to us about ancient Egypt is variable geometry. Sometimes authors are obscured, sometimes these are passages that are not taken into account within the very writings from which information considered essential today is drawn. Moreover, the use of water and the presence of underground passages on the Giza Plateau seem to be established for several authors. Yet these are key elements to which no credibility or truth is attributed by our contemporaries. Why? I couldn't tell you. This video shows that things are far from clear, which is an understatement. We will see in the next issue, the release date of which is yet to be determined, but it will come very quickly, rest assured, so we will see in the next issue that inconsistencies, or rather divergences, are even more numerous when it comes to the origins of the secondary pyramids and the Pyramid of Mykerinos. Well, not so secondary after all, because you will see that the trend of the text does not match what is said today, and that the ramifications of these inconsistencies lead very quickly, I give it to you in the 1000, to the construction of the Great Pyramid of Khufu. Hoping that you enjoyed this video, I thank you as always for your loyalty and look forward to seeing you for the next upload. Until then, take care and stay passionate. Goodbye.